Week 16 of the fantasy football season. And here's tight end start sits every matchup this week. The first matchup, Jacksonville Jaguars at the New York Jets. So right here, Evan Ingram, the last few weeks here, he's been a man on the mission for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. And one of the better tight ends and consistent tight ends in fantasy football. So this week here, with a good matchup at the New York Jets, a team that's had some struggles versus tight ends this season. I think Evan Ingram has a good ball game. And with the landscape of the tight end position being very weak, he's a must-start pretty much the rest of the way. Now to Tyler Conklin, he really hasn't done much over the last few weeks here. I know last week C.J. Uzomah found the end zone for this New York Jet team, but with Zach Wilson at quarterback, once again this week, there's not many guys you could trust on this Jet offense besides Garrett Wilson, so he's a sit for me this week. Now to the Saints at the Cleveland Browns. Juwan Johnson missed the last few weeks with injury, but last week came back with a vengeance in a big fantasy game, so he's a start for me, finding the end zone twice, and him and Andy Dalton just have that great rapport over there for this New Orleans Saints team. So Juwan Johnson's a playmaker, former wide receiver converted to a tight end a few seasons ago, and he's a guy to put in your starting lineup. Now to David Njoku, he's a start for me. I know last week wasn't a great game, but tight end is a weak position, and he's a guy with good playability that could go out there and put up numbers weekly as David Njoku. So this week here in a pretty decent matchup, I got him as a start. I think he could have a game once again, and it's unusual this season when Njoku's had two bad games in a row. Now to the Falcons at the Baltimore Ravens. Cole Pruitt, he really hasn't done much except find the end zone once or twice, but this week here I have him as a sit. I don't think Desmond Ridder looks like the guy either over there. I know it's one ball game, but another guy holding on to the football too long, not trusting his receivers, and not running quicker routes to get the ball out of his hands. So this week, Pruitt, who really hasn't done anything, is an easy sit. Now to Mark Andrews, he's been a disappointment over the last few weeks, and in my opinion, I don't think he's 100% healthy coming off the leg injury a few weeks ago. But this week here versus a weak Falcon defense with Lamar Jackson, who's been out the last few weeks as well, that definitely hasn't helped Mark Andrews. Gets back on track, and he's a start at the tight end position. Bengals at the New England Patriots. And Hayden Hurst, it's possible he might come back in this game, but even if he does, we don't know what he's going to do. Jamar Chase has been back over the last few weeks, and the tight end targets really haven't been there. So Hayden Hurst, even back in this game, he's a sit. And if Hayden Hurst doesn't play, Mitchell Wilcox is the starting tight end, and he's another guy as well that I can't trust in this ball game versus a pretty stout New England Patriot defense. So he's a sit for me as well. Here is Mitchell Wilcox. And now to Hunter Henry, it just hasn't clicked with him in this New England Patriot offense right here. Obviously, he had better days when he was with the Los Angeles Chargers as Hunter Henry, but this offense ain't moving the football. Pretty much Ramondre Stevenson and Jacoby Myers the whole offense for this Patriot team. And Hunter Henry's a sit this week. Now to the Buffalo Bills at the Chicago Bears. So right now, I got to start. Now, it's last week, a monster ball game, and this is just the nature of the tight end position. Jekyll and Hyde, and a lot of bad games and a couple pop games here and there. So Dawson Knox in a decent matchup versus a mediocre defense, I think could have a good ball game at the Chicago Bears. And he's a guy that maybe he's getting the trust back once again from Josh Allen, especially in the red zone after having 9 touchdowns last season. Now to the Bears, Cole Kmet, he's been decent this season, better at home than he has been on the road, and this is a home game, obviously, for Kmet and the Bears. But Cole Kmet, I don't know if Justin Fields is really going to get him the football, and this Buffalo Bill defense, we know, is one of the best units in all pro football. I know last week the Dolphins had their way a little bit, putting up points, but this week here, I don't see Kmet doing much, and he was a guy I also recommended dropping early in the week, so he's a sit for me. In this one is Cole Kmet. Now to the Giants at the Minnesota Vikings. So Daniel Bellinger's been back the last couple weeks. He hasn't done much. You can't trust him in this one. He's a sit. And Tanner Hudson, the backup tight end for this New York Giant team. So pretty much no production from these tight ends for the Giants. And they're easy sits this week. Now to TJ Hawkinson, he's a start. I know the last couple of weeks, the numbers really haven't been popping off the page where he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. The last 3 weeks here is TJ Hawkinson, but this week here I think he can get right. And there's a lot of good players on this Viking team for week in and week out for Hawkinson to have those monster games, but he could break out any week, and that's why you just got to stick with him and keep him in the starting lineup. Now to the Detroit Lions at the Carolina Panthers. A bright big touchdown last week that nevertheless won the ball game for the Detroit Lions with a 51-yard touchdown on a 4th down where he just did a little out route and he took it to the house, no secondary help, and he showed some good speed, but he's not a guy I could have confidence in. That was his only catch of the game, and Brock Wright's pretty much been a touchdown dependable tight end for this Detroit Lion team. So this week here, in a decent matchup even versus the Panthers, I can't trust him. He's a sit, and Tommy Tremble's a sit for me. No production from the tight end position pretty much all season for this Carolina Panther team, and their passing game's been in shambles as well. It's pretty much DJ Moore or bust for this team. So Tremble's a sit. Now to the Seattle Seahawks at the Kansas City Chiefs. Noah Fant. I know I said a couple weeks ago he's a guy to drop, but now with Tyler Lockett out of the lineup for a week or two, at least with the broken finger, I think more targets are going to go to Noah Fant. We saw last week he found the end zone with 14 fantasy points, which one of his better games, obviously, as the Seattle Seahawks. And in a game where they're going to be trailing and chasing points, most likely as a Seahawk team. I got him as a start this week. He is Noah Fant. And now to Travis Kelce. Once again, he'll probably be a top tight end of the week is Kelce. And he's one of the best tight ends already of all time here. So he's a start for me, is obviously Travis Kelce. And there's not much to say about him, obviously. So now to the next game. Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. So Jordan Akins, he's had some flash games here and there, but in a big situation, I still can't count on him. If you want to pick him up and stash him on your team, if you're in a keeper league or something, or maybe next week you want to play him, maybe, but this week, there's still not that bad at tight ends where I'm going to say you start Jordan Akins, no doubt about it. So this week, he's a sit. Osagiama Okonkwo's a different story. The last few weeks, he's been one of the main targets in this Tennessee offense. And Traylon Burks, I know, might come back in this one. But Okonkwo's a playmaker, and he's a guy they like over there in Tennessee and want to force feed him the ball a little bit more. And a big red zone target as well. So this week, versus a pretty weak Texan defense, I got him as a start. But I'll give the Texans credit where credit is due. They took the Cowboys to the limit, and they took the Chiefs to overtime to the limit as well. But lost is this Texan team. And Austin Hooper's a sit for me. Okonkwo's passed him on the depth chart pretty much and putting up fantasy points. And Austin Hooper, just another lost season for the most part for him. And he's a sit now to the Commanders at the 49ers. Logan Thomas, I thought he would do some decent things this season, but this hasn't been the case. He hasn't been 100% healthy. And I think he was a one-hit wonder a couple seasons ago as Logan Thomas. And now the last few years, he hasn't been a fantasy option, so he's a sit. And now to the 49ers, George Kittle, he's a start for me, no doubt about it. Last week, a huge ball game, finding the end zone twice. I don't think he's going to do that again, but he's also one of the top tight ends in fantasy football. And he's a guy you just throw out there in each and every week for the start. Now to the Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Goedert is a start. He's coming off an IR. I know Hurts might not play in this ball game, but he's still a guy that you're going to have confidence in there. He's a big play tight end. Tight end's a weak position, and right away, back in the lineup, Goddard's a top 5 tight end this week. Down to the Cowboys, Dalton Schultz. I know last week was a down week, but this is a week where I think Dak Prescott and this offense is going to have to count on Schultz a little bit more in this one, because you know the attention's going to be on CeeDee Lamb after he came off a big ball game. Michael Gallup really hasn't done much. I know Noah Brown had a big breakout game last week, but that's few and far between for him. So I think Dalton Schultz is a decent option this week, even after coming off a bad game. And he's a start. Now to the Las Vegas Raiders at the Steelers. Darren Waller found the end zone in his first game back last week. And I'm going to put him in the starting lineup here with the defense attentions on Devontae Adams. Waller will have that one-on-one coverage or a linebacker on him. I think he could take advantage a little bit of this Steelers team in this ball game. And I'll give him the starting nine. Now to the Steelers side of things, Pat Freiermuth. He's a borderline option for me. Last week, a goose egg, and that's definitely concerned. Freiermuth with Trubisky starting, I don't know if he could get him the football. I know this Las Vegas Raider defense obviously isn't that good. But right here, Pat Freiermuth, the last couple weeks, the numbers have gone down. And now coming off a goose egg last week, there's just no way I could trust him as a full throttle start. So if you got Freiermuth on your team and no better tight end options, I have him as a borderline option at best this week. Green Bay Packers at the Miami Dolphins. So Robert Tonyan, he really hasn't done much over the last few weeks here, and he's a guy you can't trust in fantasy football. Last season, he was decent before the injury, Tonyan, and even a couple years ago as well, he was good for fantasy football. But this Packer team offense hasn't been that good this season. They're not really finishing off drives, and Tonyan really hasn't been involved, so he's a sit this week. And the same with Mike Gesicki. Last season, he was a solid fantasy option for the majority of the season, but this year, not playing as many snaps, not getting on the field a lot as Mike Gesicki, and he's more of a blocker than anything for this Miami Dolphin team with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle pretty much eating up all the targets, so he's a sit as well. Now to the Broncos at the Los Angeles Rams. Greg Dulcich in this one, he's going to be a sit for me. I know he's had a couple good games early on in the season, but he's been a hot and cold tight end with a couple good games and then a few bad games piled in for Dulcich. And this week here versus a Ram defense I know isn't all that great this season. Even if Russell Wilson's back in this game, I don't see a great game out of Dulcich, and he's a sit for me. And Tyler Higbee finally found the end zone on Monday Night Football in Week 15, but he's pretty much been a non-existent tight end as well. This Bronco defense still a pretty decent unit this season, and I got him as a sit as well. Now to the Tampa Bay Bucks at the Arizona Cardinals. I know Cade Otton, he didn't do much in that ball game versus Cincinnati Bengals, but this week here versus a weak Arizona Cardinal defense that gives up the second most fantasy points to tight ends on the season, I think Cade Otton could go out there and carve out a decent ball game, and it might be a surprise to people that I got him as a start, but I think Otton could be a good play tight end this week versus the Arizona Cardinals. And I think in the future as well, he's a decent prospect for this Tampa Bay Buck team. A guy could go out there, put up some decent fantasy points, definitely be a red zone target, and I got him as a start. And now to Trey McBride, one of the better college tight ends coming out this season. But this season, in the 3 starts since Zach Ertz went down, we pretty much haven't seen anything. And this week versus a pretty tough Tampa Bay defense versus tight ends, I can't trust McBride in this one. And he's an easy sit. And now the final game of the week, Monday Night Football, Los Angeles Chargers at the Indianapolis Colts. So Gerald Everett to start for me in this one. Indianapolis' defense obviously isn't that good. And Everett, I know he's had some good games, some bad games, but for the most part, he's been one of the most steady tight ends this season, even though that doesn't say much with the way the landscape of the tight end position's been this season. But this week, I got confidence on Monday Night Football and Gerald Everett, and I'll give him the nod. And now to the Colts side of things, Jelani Woods and Kylan Grayson, these guys have been up and down this season. This offense as a whole has been up and down, and not really fantasy trustworthy as this Indianapolis Colts team, besides maybe Michael Pittman here and there, and Jonathan Taylor before he went down for the season. So Woods and Granson, they don't get enough targets, they don't put up enough fantasy points, and they're easy sits this week. So that's tight end start sits every matchup of Week 16 of the fantasy football season.